was something we started back in March when the quarantine first hit, and we decided to turn isolation into collaboration at that time. And we've reached out to all of our friends and supporters and people who have done trainings with us and linked up with us in a variety of ways to see what they could offer the world. And I'm really excited today to have Dr. Eric Hurst and Robert Jackson and Jack Solano as our panel today. And I just wanted to take a minute to briefly introduce them. I know some of you might have read their bios. Dr. Hurst and I, he found the Global Youth Village somehow back in the day, in the early 2000s, and became a really prominent player in getting young people from Loudoun County to the program. And he was, I think, both he and Susie Kelly have been my favorite gatekeepers because they are so invested in the people that they mentor, and that they just really see that it's, you know, you can take people really far if you give them good opportunities and give them support. So he sent a lot of young people to the Global Youth Village, and we always had great conversations about the best way to support young people. So I learned a lot from Eric over the years. So today I just want to briefly say more about him. Dr. Hurst is a social worker, an educator, and human services professional. And he served as a school social worker for Loudoun County Public Schools and of Northern Virginia, and also St. John's Community Services in DC. He's also served as a field instructor and part-time lecturer for the Master of Social Work program at George Mason and Rutgers University. He's earned a Doctor of Education and Educational Leadership degree from Argosy University, and a Master of Social Work and a Bachelor of Science in Human Development from Howard University. And he's pursuing a shift in his vocation as he's returned to full-time study in the fall of 2016 and recently graduated from the Princeton Theological Seminary with a dual degree, Master of Divinity, Master of Arts in Christian Education and Formation. So he's got this great fourth act going on in his life. Obviously committed to education. Jack Solano was one of Eric's students. He grew up in Northern Virginia as well, in Loudoun County. He studied political theory and political philosophy at Howard University. And while at Howard, he participated in the activist community, worked as an investigator of DC public defenders, and decided to pursue a career in law. After graduating with a joint degree, he continued his education at Harvard Law School. And there he focused on public interest legal practice, working for 2 years as a student attorney with an organization dedicated to protecting the rights of low-income tenants and homeowners. After a short stint as a litigator, he quit the law firm to pursue a career in federal government, and he now works as counsel for the Committee on Homeland Security, the Subcommittee on Border Security, focusing on immigration policy in the United States House of Representatives. That's very important work. Thank you, Jack, for doing that. And Robert Jackson III, also known as Robert Azim Jackson, as I mentioned, he was a former GYV alumni. He's from Virginia by way of Delaware. The perspective and healing he gained and felt respectively while attending the Global Youth Village has been foundational in his career and personal journey. The former Georgetown School of Foreign Service and Columbia University Teachers College alum credits the GYV experience for his empathy-driven approach to leadership and community building. Currently, Rob works at the American Civil Liberties Union and New York University Metro Center, where he uses his knowledge of data science, protest and liberation, and global studies to serve his community. I highly recommend you read Robert's LinkedIn profile and his personal mission statement on there. It's very touching. And remember him in your thoughts because he's doing important work too. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Ash.
Thank you so much. Bear with me for a few moments. Welcome once again to our Thursday Global Viewpoints Forum. Today we're truly honored and blessed to have our friend and colleague Dr. Eric Hurst with us, and a former GYV participant, Mr. Robert Azim Jackson, and a new friend, Mr. Jack Solano. I hope we get to know each other much better. All three gentlemen represent and advocate for the basic principles that we at Legacy International have strived to live, share, and offer to the world through our programs for over 40 years. And as we face the rising and complex challenges in our society, and as we see those challenges reflected globally, we realize that we are at a critical moral and ethical crossroads in human history in planetary survival. As global as these challenges are, and they are perforce
come back. Hang on a minute. Oh, we lost you, Mr. Ash.
Where did you? As we face the rising, can you hear me now?
Yes.
As we face the rising and complex challenges in our society, and as we see those challenges reflected globally, we realize that we're at a critical moral and ethical crossroads in human history and planetary survival. And as global as these challenges are, and they are deeply personal and local, the convergence of COVID-19, an invisible disruptor that knows no barrier of race or ethnicity, religious affiliation, gender, economic or social status, and the rise of authoritarianism and nationalism, further exacerbated by the endemic and deeply rooted racism, has raised core questions about our most basic principles of rule of law and trust, faith and compassion, justice and equality. Is unifying humanity around common values a reality that is attainable, or is it something that will forever be over the horizon? How much longer can we survive as human beings if we continue to undermine our ethical and moral foundation? What unites us? What divides us? Why have the inner values become detached from the outer actions as manifest in daily life? Empathy, compassion, wanting for one's family, friend, neighbor, stranger, what one wants for oneself. The way to create a new tomorrow today means clarifying the core values of our life, utilizing all the tools available, creating new means to achieve equity and equality and security for all. My dear friends, we must rectify the wrongs that have been tolerated and allowed to magnify for hundreds of years. We must model our thoughts and actions to reflect the great people who preceded us and inspired us. In a letter to President Dwight D. Eisenhower, Dr. Albert Schweitzer said, "May it be given to us both to see the day when the world's people will realize that the fate of all humanity is now at stake, and that it is urgently necessary to make bold decisions that can deal adequately for the agonizing situation in which the world now finds itself." My friends, that was over 65 years ago. For so many years, we at Legacy International have strived to address the critical issues facing individuals by providing the skills and motivation for sustained change. And we will continue to do that in partnership and with the support of and for people like our guests today. The harsh reality is that as some struggle for change and strive for and die for justice and equality, affirm the essential goodness of human beings, embrace the other with love and compassion, there are forces of darkness and ignorance and prejudice and embedded fears that are bulwarks against change, against recognition of all that unifies us, not only to each other, but with this planet. Each of us has to make personal decisions that daily reinforce our commitment to such change and action that moves us forward as humane human beings. And we will, inshallah, contain and continue to address these issues in every way we can. And I know that our alumni and our friends will do the same. We must continue to support, collaborate with, and work together for the only solution that is acceptable to assure the health and the equality, equal opportunity, safety for all by affirming in our work and our decisions, our words and our actions, these core values that unite us in our outer life and spiritually in our hearts. And that's what I believe our guests today stand for and work for and strive to embed in our hearts and minds in social, religious, legal, and health systems every day of their lives. What an honor I feel to have them with us today, to re-inspire us, to motivate us, to press us forward and upward and onward. Eric, Jack, Robert, welcome. Over to you.
Who would you like to go first?
It's up to you, Eric. Go ahead.
You guys mind if I start, Jack, Robert?
Go on, Brother Harris.
Thank you, thank you. Good afternoon. I am so very happy to be with you today. And my remarks will be brief during our plenary so we can give more time to the younger generation, Robert and Jack, as they share their thoughts on the common good and what they're doing. But I wanted to give you a little bit of my backstory. I was born in 1973 in Dayton, Ohio, and then beginning at the age of 1, after my parents divorced, I was raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is home to me. And I think my experiences there growing up over 16 years really shaped my initial view of the world and my commitments. I am a product of public education in the United States, specifically public education in the state of Pennsylvania and in the city of Philadelphia. And when I entered the 3rd grade, I began attending a school that really provided a shift in how I viewed myself, how I viewed the larger world, and what my contributions could be to the larger world. That was ingrained in us as elementary school students at Fittler Academics Plus School in Germantown, the Germantown section of the city. That experience brought, I see someone nodding. Are you familiar with Fittler?
I'm familiar with the Philly area, so.
Yeah, familiar with the Germantown area.
Okay. Fittler was at the corner of Seymour and Knox Streets, and it was the city's first public magnet school at the elementary level. And students were enrolled by lottery from all the different segments of the city. And that, for many of us, that was the first time when we were together learning with white students, Latinx students, Asian students, Black students, African students, Caribbean students, and they kept us together. There were 2 grades, two classes per grade, and they kept us together as cohort groups for the entire time we were there. And while we were there, we engaged in cross-cultural learning, learning about the other, learning about ourselves. That serves as the foundation of my commitments as a social worker, as an educator, and as someone who is personally invested in the common good. I went to high school in Philadelphia, graduating from Lincoln on Motivation High School, and then I enrolled in Howard University. When I graduated from Howard, I returned 4 years later for the Master of Social Work program, and it was that program that really put me in contact with working professionally to address human need, starting off with mental health services in the District of Columbia, and then moving into, with my 2nd year internship, school social work, which is what has brought me with you today. It was as a school social worker in Loudoun County, Virginia, at Loudoun Valley High School in Purcellville, Virginia, where I feel as though I really engaged in substantive work about learning about difference. And I was the first African-American male hired by the school system in 2003, and the very first African-American male social worker assigned to the Loudoun Valley High School cluster. It was a learning experience for all of us. But in that, we found a common ground, and we were able to work together for a 10-year period. And in that 10-year period, I'm very happy to say that I was able to connect with young people and introduce them to the concepts of working together, the concepts of the importance of embracing or engaging the other, and thinking about what their contributions could be to the larger world. My awareness of the term common good really started at Loudoun Valley High School in Loudoun County, Virginia. I think I had been working on it. I think I was committed to it, but the concept itself, the terminology became real to me when I was working with students, helping them identify potential opportunities for post-graduation. And one of the schools that we came across was Bowdoin College in Maine. How many are familiar with Bowdoin? Okay. Bowdoin has a commitment in its pedagogical framework to the common good, and it's had that commitment since 1802. That's significant to me because a graduate of Bowdoin College wound up establishing and is the namesake of Howard University in Washington, D.C., General Oliver Otis Howard. So that's where we really started talking about it in our group work when we were exploring opportunities for enhancement and enrichment. That's how I got to know about the Global Youth Village. That's how Robert became the very first student from Loudoun County, Virginia to attend the Global Youth Village, which led to a good number of students, I would say, for about 5 or 6 years following. And each that came back, because they had a concentrated time for about 2 weeks in Bedford, Virginia, with people from all over the world, each came back with a broader perspective about what is important to being a global citizen, how we are all connected to what's going on in the world. What happens in Russia affects what happens in Philadelphia. It's a very important concept that I think has been lost recently. And I will not blame any particular administration for that. I just think it's been lost recently in our national and international dialogue, and it's got to come back. I think COVID-19 is showing us that we are all connected. We are all affected across economic strata, across racial and cultural strata, across educational strata. We are all affected. What happens to one has a direct impact on other people. And so with that, I have decided to really make pursuing the common good one of the main features of my vocational work, whether that's in ministry, whether that's in social work, whether that's in teaching at the graduate level in social work programs. I am committed to the idea that we all have to be aware of the common good. We each have to define that. What will that mean for us? And we each have a responsibility to pursue it. I am a social worker. Many people don't know what that means because the term is nebulous. But just let me just read very quickly what social work is from the National Association of Social Workers in the preamble to our Code of Ethics. The primary mission of the social work profession is to enhance human well-being and help meet basic human needs of all people, with particular attention to the needs and empowerment of people who are vulnerable, oppressed, and living in poverty. A historic and defining feature of social work is the profession's focus on individual well-being in a social context and the well-being of society. Fundamental to social work is attention to the environmental forces that create, contribute to, and address problems in living. That is what brings us to this conversation today and why I promoted it, why I suggested it, and now I will stop talking so that my two former students can share. Thank you.
Jack, if you want to go first, feel free, brother, but I'm happy to go as well.
No, please, Rob, you go ahead and I'll follow you.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you, Brother Hurst. It's always a treat for me to get a snapshot, just a second of where you come from, because I think if I were to take, 5 minutes or so of our time, when I think about our time together, I say this every time. You were just some brother that I didn't know existed in a town full of white folk who was listening to Beethoven at the time, I thought. Yeah, and I just remember when I look back, I remember being so taken aback and overwhelmed by your presence, but not in the same way that I've known the feeling of being overwhelmed in this country. It was overwhelmed with a sense of compassion and instant connection. It was something that had been a deficit in my experience since moving to Virginia. You know, I said that I led with the line, I'm from Virginia by way of Delaware, because I come from 3 to 4 generations of Black people, Black Americans who have served their country in one way or another. A grandfather who, you know, I pour my spirit from, who served in Vietnam, went back 3 times, bootlegged in Virginia before that, and bootlegged in Virginia after that, who built railroads in this country, and couldn't get the VA to take care of him because he was a Black man living in Roanoke. I come from that tradition of Black women who were born in Virginia and sent to Delaware because their mom couldn't take care of them because of mental health that would never be addressed. Even today, in today's climate, wouldn't be seen as an issue. So the children were kept together, but also kept apart at the same time. Families who had to grow together in love without ever seeing the love that they wanted to give to their children. This deficit, it wasn't that I wasn't getting this love at home from my father who was raising me by himself. It was that should never be the source for a child to only feel compassion and love. And Dr. Hurst, without ever saying a word, showed me more compassion and love in 5 to 10 minutes in his little ass office than I had received in any moment in schooling since I was 8 years old to when I graduated from Loudoun Valley High School at 18. And I think that I have to start there because all the things I'm going to say now are built off a foundation of others, those alive with us and those who are no longer with us. So I always try to start there, acknowledging my ancestors, acknowledging those who I will never know who sacrificed for me to be able to be here today in this comfortable blazer, in this comfortable chair, and have this comfortable conversation, which is not a comfortable conversation for all people. So I like to start there. And then second thing, I want to just take wherever you are collectively, if you're in the United States, I just want to do a collective land acknowledgement of our indigenous people who are either with us, but their ancestors are not, who made it possible for us to be where we are right now, sitting comfortably where we are today. So those are the two things I like to preface. Now, a little more about the president and me, who I am today, and, the common good. My idea of the common good, if I had to draw a picture, it would never be complete, and that would be just fine. For me, the common good has always meant a constant question and not a statement. It is always a wondering and always a reimagining, and not a complacency or satisfaction with what is. Yes, because I'm a Black man who at age 15 was assaulted by two 22-year-old white boys just for existing, or trying to stop them from assaulting a 15-year-old Black girl, and watched my entire neighborhood, a small town of Purcellville, not only see this in real time in broad daylight, but see it on the news and ask me, what did I do wrong? And then I still turn to that community and try to show them my love. For me, the common good is it will never come from others. It will always have to be something internal. And for me, the common good is allowed to go through ebbs and flow. It's a cycle of life, not a linear path to greatness. There are moments in my life where the common good for me was a 6-figure salary, a house, a wife, kids, and then I donate to my local charities on the holidays. And then at another point in my life, the common good was putting my life on the line so that my brother doesn't have to feel the pain and tragedy of racism, and realizing that that is a unsustainable path too. My point is, and I'll end it here, for me, the common good is not something you'll ever be able to see. It's not something you'll be able to hear. It's not something that someone can tell you what it is or give to you. It is something that you already have and always have had, because it comes from the people, and that's 5 minutes. It comes from the people who've always loved you. So whenever you feel lost around that, because I don't have a clear answer, that's where you have to search for it, and that's where I continue to search for it. So when I think about the common good, you can't learn unless you see. And when someone gives you the love that Dr. Hurst has shared with me, with no commitment, with no expectation, that's the path I've tried to follow, with all full commitment and no expectation from others. That is the closest I've gotten to the common good. And there's a lot of things I can say about manifestation, about expertise of the common good, what expertise is required to achieve it, what passion is needed, what compassion is recognized and needed. But I think we can talk about those things in our breakout rooms. But yeah, that's me.
Thank you for sharing those stories, Rob. So I'll start off first. I obviously want to echo the appreciation for Dr. Hurst for the role he played at Loudoun Valley High for so many people, I think. And Dr. Hurst has been, for me, a continuous source of wisdom and guidance as I've taken a sometimes circuitous path through my education and my career, and have at many points been unsure if I was going the right direction, or if I was confident that I was headed in the right place. And Dr. Hurst's advice has always been extraordinarily valuable. So I just want to acknowledge him for that. I'll start off as the others have, by just sort of discussing how I came to have my current understanding of this issue. Fighting for, striving for, advocating for the common good, for the advancement of the well-being of the entirety of society, and that project. So I think I got my clearest education on this from my fellow students at Howard University. So I was absolutely honored to study at Howard. It's an incredible institution. And I think one of the most powerful things about it, for me at least, was this overarching constant idea that we were there to use education to advance the well-being of other people. It was a mission-driven education. This was something that I got from my classmates, from my professors, and it was, for me, incredibly motivational. You know, I think it encouraged me to think about my education as a way that I could make life better for some people outside of myself, outside of my community, outside of my family. So when I was motivated and first inspired at Howard, I engaged actively in activism, discussion heavily around issues of white supremacy, mass inequality, corruption in government, but also in smaller institutions. That was really my introduction to engagement in this struggle for the common good. And I think it set the foundation for how I approached really my life moving forward. It's certainly something that I carried to law school. Now, the law can be an extremely individualistic field. It's and an extremely competitive field too, especially in law school. There is a pressure to outperform, a pressure to out-impress, pressure to be smarter or better, or, you know, and that creates a very individualistic atmosphere, and questions of working for the common good can get lost in that morass, frankly. But I think I tried to anyway, carry the lessons I had learned at Howard and the experiences and support of my fellow graduates of Howard to law school, and was fortunate there to be able to be a part of a legal advocacy organization. We represented people who were facing evictions, low-income tenants, primarily Black and Hispanic in the Boston area, who were facing eviction, foreclosure, discrimination. Many of these people were struggling with countless problems. I mean, I remember one client I had she was facing eviction because of a noise complaint, and she was dealing with mental health problems, physical health problems, discrimination on the basis, in my argument, in my view, of her mental health challenges, not to mention her ethnicity and her immigration status. And that continued to develop my understanding of how essential it is that we all work for this. Seeing someone who is struggling with so many issues that we might raise in these discussions of the common good really emphasized how essential it is to push on, it's difficult, but to push on every front and to make progress in every area, not just in income inequality or not just in other white supremacy, but also in issues related to immigration status, the way we treat people, the way we support people in our society who are going through difficult times or who have been raised with fewer advantages than I was, frankly. So these are experiences that I've held with me. And after law school, I went to a private law firm. You know, frankly, student loans were on my mind. So I thought, let me work in private practice for a little while. Maybe I'll do some pro bono, be able to keep working on these common good issues. And I did do some pro bono, and that was great. But this is nothing against my former colleagues at the firm. Many of them did care deeply, but they were focused on advancing their careers, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think for me, with my experiences from Howard, with my experiences from pro bono work, I was not satisfied being there, especially with, I won't, hide my feelings about the current administration. I deeply oppose virtually everything this administration has done. I think it has done a tremendous amount of damage to what we might broadly call the common good. So especially with that, I felt that excuse me, my computer's about to die. Sorry about that. Just had to plug in real quick. So especially with the current administration, I felt that I really wanted to keep engaging. So I left, I came down to DC, managed to get a job on Capitol Hill, and now I'm engaging in this struggle for the common good, or trying to the best of my ability, in a sort of a third way, which is, I think, why I was so excited to talk about this issue today, because I've been engaged in this fight for the common good as an activist, as a caseworker in the law, and now as someone who's advocating in the federal government for advancing these ideas, advancing the good of society as a whole. And so I'm excited to discuss in the breakout groups these issues. I think before I end, I just want to flag one thing. I think this is like incredibly relevant right now, perhaps more relevant than it's been at any point in my life, this discussion. I recall thinking in 2016, before the November election, before President Trump was elected, I recall thinking, there are so many problems facing the world. How can we possibly win? How can we possibly make progress? Whether it's climate change or social inequality or incredibly persistent racism and white supremacy, how can we possibly succeed? And then President Trump was elected, buoyed by a group of people, many of whom relish ideas of social division. And I thought again, in 2017, 2018, there are so many problems. How can we possibly succeed? And then the pandemic hit. One of the clearest examples of how essential it is that our personal actions are aligned with what's good for the broader community. And I found myself thinking back and again having the thought, how can we possibly succeed? And I think I would echo, with that in mind, I would echo something that Rob said, that there is not one single endpoint. There's not, you struggle and you win and it's over. It's a continuous struggle. And I think if you look at American history, you see that gains can be lost, progress can be overturned. It is not like you hit a step and you're good. No, it's to actually make progress, you have to accept that there will never be an end point, and that we have to continue struggling in every way we can. And that can be exhausting, and that can be overwhelming, and that can feel impossible. And I think that makes some people think, what's the point? And I think that part of what we have to do is talk to people and say the fact that this is continuous should give us strength and should make us confident in our actions and should encourage us and give us inspiration as we all work together and continuously work together for the foreseeable future, for the entirety of our lives, to advance the ideal of the common good. So I've talked long enough, but I'm looking forward to the breakout sessions. And thank you again for letting me run my mouth.
Thank you to all of you. I think what's really interesting when you prepare for these types of things is the reflection, right? So we're created a space here, a pause, where all of that noise that distracts us all day long has taken us into this deep conversation. And I venture to say that everybody who's here today thinks about it, but maybe we don't get a chance to talk about it and verbalize those beliefs, and then followed up by action. So I really appreciate the conversation that you guys developed and are taking this journey we're going on. We're going to do breakout rooms right now. My colleague Jason is set those up. So we're going to have 3 groups. One's going to be with Eric, one's going to be with Jack, one's going to be with Robert, and they've developed a question for your group. So you don't have to do anything. You're going to see a little thing pop up and say, you're going to breakout room 1, 2, or 3. And we're going to spend about 15. We might extend it to 20. We're going to pop in and see how the conversation's going. There'll be a little warning, 1 minute to go. So if you're in that last person speaking, try to wrap it up before you're just abruptly cut off and sent back to the main room. Okay? So enjoy the breakout room. Take us there, Jason.
The reality of our criminal industrious country is that we've criminalized things that are now considered billion-dollar industry, like the marijuana industry. So when I say opportunities, it's because they were always opportunities. It was just criminalized to serve a different cause, which was the incarceration of Black men. So my father tells me stories of turning down these opportunities because he felt in his core he wanted something different for himself, not because he thought he would go to jail. So when I think about the men in my life who have taken up the arm of the cause of citizenry, whether it's serving their country or walking the line of legality to serve their family in this country when other opportunities may be available, versus the women in my life who have also found ways to serve their family, their community, and take care of an entire household by themselves. Those are the ideas of citizenry I try to hold for myself. Someone who is self-sufficient has found the way to serve the ones they love most, but also serve the people who may not love them enough, while also understanding that there are ways to which you can serve your country and your family that are legal, quote unquote, in one era, and then quickly become illegal in another era, and knowing that you have to know in your gut what right and wrong is, because the law will always keep changing. So those are the two things I think about with citizenry. I want each of you to take as much time as you need to digest that, or just say, okay, Rob, that was very nice, but I just want to answer the question, and then we can move on. So, 'cause this is a breakout room, so we have the flexibility to talk about what we want to talk about. So I'll pause, I'll land the plane.
Okay. I'll go ahead and speak because I didn't grow up in this country. So a lot of the influences were not my backdrop. But the other thing that happened was that I didn't feel like a citizen of this country. When I came to the United States, I'd always been told, well, you're different because you're American. And I came to the United States and woo, could not relate. And so I lost any sense of identity or any sense of citizenry. And I think a combination of just life experiences, including, I would say, getting involved with Legacy and all of its work, and it bringing citizens from other countries. And in particular, during my time when I was very actively involved, a lot of the work was based on refugees who had lost their sense of identity coming to the United States and discovering their new identity in this country, but at the same time also being given encouragement to appreciate the sense of citizenry that they had had in their previous country. And the other was, of course, conflict resolution. This sense of identity and citizenry, for example, with the Palestinian-Israeli conflicts. Who's a citizen of what country? How's our sense of identity shaped by our identification with the country that we're a part of? And that conflict continues to this day, my sense of citizenry began to finally form itself with all the other inputs that I was involved in when I became a school teacher in an American public school system, because I'd never actually really participated in the American public school system. And it gave me an understanding about how people's sense of themselves gets developed in that public school system. And it was sort of the last notch to allow me to recognize that really my identity is as a global citizen. But I had to develop that American sense of citizenry in order to finally bring all of that together.
Anybody else want to chime in?
Can I? Okay, well.
Oh, Stella. Okay, Sarah, then Stella. Good.
Oh, no problem. She can go. Then. Okay. Okay, I'm first. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think our sense of identity as a person and as a citizen really differs from country to country. So me coming to Iraq is quite different from how identity and citizen is being related in America. But I could relate to a lot of what Robert Jackson said about doing the right thing, wanting to get money for the family, but then knowing that it's illegal, or maybe you can do it too later on. So we do have a lot of things relating to that. But one thing that I do want to point out is, I mean, in Iraq, if you want to be like a good citizen, then you're always about Iraq, we are Arabs, and it's more about being only Iraqi to the Arabs. But if you see Iraq, it does have a lot of other ethnic backgrounds. So the current definition of being a good Iraqi citizen is not including all the other people from other different ethnic backgrounds. But I think, when you grow as a child, or what you see from the outside world, or what we view is at the internet and stuff, is you do see that after all we're humans. And I do think on that aspect you should relate to yourself, and that's what I did growing up, because we are humans and common good is with all humans. It's not with this person and that person and this identity and that country. And as Miss Yovni mentioned, sorry if I'm not spelling your name right, but she did mention about how we are global citizens. And I do think that plays a very, very big role, because like you can be a good citizen and be bad to a certain person, defining by your country. But what about humans? We are all humans after all. And I did I think maybe my parents had a big role in it, because they never told me where this ethnic background, that ethnic background. I saw it in school. Like I went to school and I saw people treating each other different, especially working. I was like, why? What is happening? Why are people treating each other differently? And then, and I stood by my beliefs. I stood by saying that is wrong. And I can do, let me see what I can do. What is the impact I can do? And I always stood by my beliefs. I always stood by having an inclusive community to everyone, be it any ethnic background. So I can go on like what are the steps I took, what are the steps that you can do as a citizen that helped our community, but I don't know if that's part of the question.
I think that was really great, Sarah, how you touched on areas of your experience as a Kurdish Iraqi and the freedom your parents gave you to, the freedom that your parents allowed for you to have to just shape your own identity and ideas, so that when you went to school where they're not next to you to tell you right from wrong, you already knew, because you had, and you not only did you know what right from wrong was, but you had the confidence and the ability to say, also, I'm going to say this is wrong, which is, I think, another step in citizenry that is really powerful right now, right? Like, I think before I hand it off to Stella to share what she was going to say next, I think she was next. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mary. But before I hand it off to Stella, I think it's important to point out that, Trayvon Martin was hunted down and murdered in 2012. We all saw enough information there to be up in arms. I know that because that was when I really marked the moment where I turned a corner. I was a sophomore at Georgetown, and I remember it was a beautiful Saturday on the quad, right? One of those like classic college days, beautiful. And I saw 20 Black people leaving campus together, and I asked them where they were going, and they were like, we're going down to, the courthouse in DC to just protest. And I was like, what's a I really, literally in my mind, I was like, what the heck's a protest? Like, and I noticed that like the juxtaposition of the 20 of us in all black in hoodies, walking in the rest of Georgetown's blue and gray campus and Ivy League-esque individuals, just enjoying a day on the quad. And I think there's like, I really resonate with what you said about right and wrong, because in that moment I was like, it wasn't like I had my dad there saying, you need to go protest. It was that innate knowing, right?
Yeah.
And I think so. I think you touched on that in a very beautiful way. Yvonne, you touched on the point about being a global citizen and coming to that point through the foundation of understanding your Americanness. I think that's a critical point to hold on to, right? Like, and Sarah, you said similarly, like through your lens as a Kurdish Iraqi, like you don't have to divorce yourself from your foundation to become a global citizen, right? I think
very true.
Globalized citizenry, I think some folks are afraid that it means it dilutes who they are, that they lose something by gaining something, which is, we all know math, 2 + 2 does not equal 0, it equals 4. So, I mean, instead of losing something, they believe they're going to lose something when really they're gaining. So I'll land it there, and I'm going to hand this off to Stella, but I just wanted to call out the brilliance from the two of you and your sharing out, and why it's important for us to share out this way, because, wow. So go ahead, Stella.
Thank you. For me, I see, I think it's more of like a journey. I come from Nigeria, and I had the opportunity to travel to a few other countries while I was much younger, with my, parent be international business entrepreneurs and own their own, businesses. So,
right.
Out of 7, I'm one out of 7 children. all 7 of us had the opportunity to move around as well. And that also gave us the opportunity to participate in a global, forum like Global Youth Village that we were able to attend when we were much younger. So I think for me, that opportunity was able to allow me to see that I was more than just a Nigerian citizen. And that helped me to just kind of grow in the sense of to have the global responsibility to think, to put others in, to put my place in others' shoes. So let's say, for the common good, you have people, having a different life than I have. So to be able to just take 1 or 2 and put them and put myself in their shoes helped me to just think of them, that what can I do? How can I be responsible for them? So it's for me to be a global citizen, I see it as more of just really like I think you were the one that said it earlier when we were all together. It's more than just speaking it, is more of like taking actions. And that way we are not living what we are supposed to do as an individual, whether or not the government takes care of it or not. We as an individual have a responsibility to go forward with an effort, and it is an endless journey that you have to constantly participate in, knowing that there's no ending until the Lord asks you to rest. So to me, that is how I see the definition of a global common concept. Being able to just put yourself in order. Now, you might not be able to handle everything and do what you feel you want to do, but having to actually think about it, look for people that are common like you, and working towards it and doing the little that you can do. That is how the common good can continue without just having to say it as a sentence. So I'll leave it there.
I love that. And I want to call out, we have, I think 1 minute, I think I saw something pop out about 1 minute till we return to the other room. So I want to apologize to Jason and Mohammed and Morgan and Mary if you wanted to share out. If you all have like maybe a pithy, you had more time to think, so that's a plus. So maybe you can put it together pithy. If y'all want to go popcorn style and tell me what does citizenry mean to you. And I think, honestly, I still think we answered the main question. I just think we approached it from a different way. If you all have something you want to say quickly about the idea of citizenry, feel free before we move in the other room.
I'm just going to say quickly, like giving back, like whatever I can do to give back, whether that's at different times of my life, that's been bigger things and smaller things. But if I look at the thread, going and serving at a soup kitchen in 8th grade at my Catholic school, that was pivotal. And just exposure to people that needed to be fed. Well, and then I just think the pandemic has just unleashed all this knowledge. So of the inequities. Anyway, that's my pithy.
And then I'll quickly add, I think quality of global citizenship or citizenry is empathy and compassion, and not always being on the defensive. So, coming forward with the good and feeling that other people are also coming forward with the good, having that empathetic mindset.
A charitable assumption of others. Yeah, I love that. Mohammed, do you have any thoughts, brother? If you're deep in thought, don't worry about it. But I want to give you a moment if you have something you want to share. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute. There you go.
If you are talking about the idea of identity, I believe that we are all one and there is no difference. Maybe in our behaviors, there are a lot of difference. But if you think about the people are sitting beside us, maybe they are from another culture, but at the end, you can find some connection with them. Okay?
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you,
I
brother.
think we still have 50.
Yeah. Morgan, or sorry, is it Megan or Morgan? Morgan, did you want to share?
Just wanna
Oh, wait, what's this?
say that I draw you today.
Oh, I can't
don't
see it.
know.
It's your background covering it up, but I wish
Okay.
I could. Oh, I see it. There it is. Oh, is that me?
This you.
Awesome.
Oh, cool. You gotta send that to me. I love that. That's so cool.
I draw another one that we'll share in a big group.
Oh, thank you, brother. That's so beautiful. Thank you. That was
Morgan's got 20 seconds.
Morgan. Go. Thank you, Mom.
Phone's raining too, but just empathy and compassion is what I was raised in, and so that's kind of the view that I have on that. So.
No doubt. All right, y'all. We're gonna time travel back to this other place and let's see where they got with it. You know, and we're back.
Zoom is a connecting force.
Listen, oh wow, what a sentence. I mean, I don't think the company thought they would be when they first got founded. Let me tell you, I worked in startups for a while, and they don't think about things on an existential level. They think about things as money. So if they would have went into the meeting saying, hey, we're going to change the world, that's probably something they said, but not like this. But you are absolutely
money. What's money? What is money? Can you define that for me? Never heard
I
of it.
just want to see, is everybody back? Jack's group is back, I think. Yeah, okay, good. So we've got a few minutes where we're just going to sort of share out any light bulbs, anything, takeaways from anybody. That could be the facilitators, it could be participants, and it was a really dynamic conversation where we were. I think we could have stayed in our breakout room for another hour. But let's start with that. Anything that's a new feeling, new thought for you around the concept of common good. Go ahead, Eric.
We were talking about the international linkages with historical problems, and I just wanted to give, if I could, Ilyona a chance to finish her thought. She was talking right as we switched back to the larger Zoom. So if she could just finish her thought, I would greatly appreciate that. I think our group would appreciate that too. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. I was actually commenting on something you said, that everything that's happening in the world now with the movements is internationally connected, also looking back into history. And my response to that was that right now in Holland, the discussion is kind of being forced because of the movement and the people on the street also there saying enough is enough. And the politicians are being forced to come and speak out, and apologies are being kind of forced out of them. And you see the current prime minister is changing his perspective, is changing his wording. So something is happening there that you see, which is correcting the big part in history that the Netherlands actually had in slave trade and other colonizing behaviors.
Thank you.
So Robert, in our group, we focused, I think, on a similar question. We took Jack's question, but we focused a lot on citizenship. And I think if there's anybody from that group that wants to talk about a takeaway that they personally are now sitting with, or Robert, share out what you took away. That's great.
Yeah, I want to give a moment if anyone else wants to go first, but I mean, well, let me just go ahead and say it. Like, because I'm excited. I'm not gonna pretend to be this, like, I'm gonna be myself here. It was a beautiful conversation. All of you are brilliant, first and foremost. Like, the way in which you all are open, and I mean this as like an EQ, emotional intelligence. Like, you all tapped into yourselves and found where I challenged you all in the moment to address Jack's question, but specifically the idea of citizenship. And what does that mean? I challenge you to say, you know, I juxtapose it to my relationship between what I consider my two families, like my father's side, my mother's side, and the representation of citizenry, family, and love I saw from both sides. How I saw the men in my family serve their country formally in the military, but also make decisions as family leaders, as family members, to be a citizen who will do anything it takes to serve their family, but also walk clear lines between what is legal and what is deemed illegal at any given moment as Black Americans. And that relationship of serving a country and serving your family while also not being served by your country and family. And you all turned it into your own experiences. And if someone, just to kind of refresh the memory, if folks want to share what they said, or if they're comfortable with me sharing it, go for it. But I'm going to pause there and just leave my words, and then maybe Sarah and Stella, a couple of folks want to share what they said briefly. Otherwise, I can do it quickly because I know we're short on time, so I don't want to. But I don't want to steal anyone's thunder because y'all said some brilliant things.
I think you can speak for me if you want to.
Okay. Well, then, yeah, I'll just share out then. And so I think that the themes that really came across in their conversation I love most, Yvonne and Sarah both really spoke to this idea of their foundational identities, as one as discovering their Americanness in Yvonne, and Sarah in her foundational piece as an Iraqi Kurdish person, and how that is their foundation that shapes their global citizenry idea, right? Like, which is I think counterintuitive to what people consider a global citizen. I think the media sells the global citizen idea as you're diluting yourself to be part of this bigger pot, right? Like that you have to give up something that you've always been to be part of this idea of a global citizen. When what I'm hearing repeatedly from each of you is, where I came from is the foundation to my global citizenry. Where I came from is the lens through which I understand the world, but it's not the lens through which I interact with the world. I interacted with the world considering myself part of a broader sense of my original identity. That's what I pulled from what y'all were saying, like that regardless of being in your localities of Nigeria, Iraq, and different parts of the US and other spaces, you found global citizenry through digging into the things that, you know, allowed you to demonstrate your love for those around you. I think Mary mentioned a soup kitchen at 8th grade, and that's so funny to me because I remember, I'm not Catholic, but I helped at a soup kitchen when I was a junior or senior in high school, a Catholic soup kitchen, and that opportunity led to me finding a second recommender for my dream college out of the blue. And I think I say that to say, like, we talked a lot about what it means to be a global citizen, but I would expand that to say, like, we have to consider what we get back in return as well. It's not, I think it's important to always center what we give to others as the foundation of why we do what we do. But I think that if we never take the time to for solidarity, for healing, for community, for acknowledgement of what we also are investing in, and how it pays dividends back to us. And I'm using a lot of maybe money type language, but I think it's important to hold that, like, we are giving things to people. We are giving ourselves, we're giving our hearts, and that's what you all pointed out as well. But I think it's important to circle back to how often you all mention who gave to you first, your parents, a teacher, just life giving you the privilege to travel the world and see other people's lives is in itself a gift that lets you have a different way of seeing. My time at the Global Youth Village opened my eyes up to it just opened my eyes. And the gifts I were given were the conversations between Dr. Suresh and myself, between the other members of the community at the time, that like I said in the top of the hour, or an hour ago, have been foundational to my approach to life. So you all seem to just center those same ideas of, you know, holding your foundation as the launch point for your global citizenry and not letting go of who you are to become a global citizen, which I think is beautiful.
Thank you, Albert. I think another point that you made was that you essentially inside yourself know the difference between right and wrong, and that's a good basis too. Jack's group, or Jack, do you want to share out anything?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just tell everyone the question we were discussing was focused on striving for freedom, particularly for communities of color in the United States, looking at how the fight for freedom is continuing today. And sort of, we discussed some of the ongoing actions opposing police brutality right now, some of the tensions inside that, and some of this work around how do we actually fight back against ideas of white supremacy, et cetera, in an effective way. And so I think someone made awesome comments about that. If anyone wants to just mention what they discussed and where our conversation went.
Can I ask the question of, so you said we're fighting for freedom. I just want to understand where the wording. Why did you choose that word freedom? Fighting for free, the phrase fighting for freedom, because we're free. Black people are free. So I'm just sort of curious about the wording.
Yes, sir. So I'd say, Robert, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. It was your question, but I think this this concept of it, this was a mainly historical question. So looking at, it was sort of retrospective, looking at the struggle for freedom from, I think, based on the parts of the question, from, first of all, from enslavement, I think that you would say is the initial phase, and then striving for freedom from the other types of societal oppression that come along with the continued white supremacy that obviously, I certainly don't need to say, has not ended. So I think this freedom from those constraints or freedom from those oppressive aspects, whether it's inadequate healthcare, I think that I would discuss, use the word freedom when talking about freedom from, inadequate healthcare or freedom from brutality. Again, this is from my perspective as, a white American male, so I certainly want to acknowledge that, but I think I would use that word nevertheless in that discussion.
Thank you for the clarification.
Can I just say something? By way of introduction, Bobby J is Robert's father.
Oh. Yeah, I want to blow up his spot, but yeah, that's my pops right there.
It's good to meet you, sir.
Want to make sure that we all know that. And that was an intriguing question. I'm sure it was read in its entirety, so this was Robert's question. And that question, looking back at the historical roots of what we are seeing right now, is definitely important. Definitely important. And this is where the reading and the research comes into play. If anybody wants to really look at this country's history and how this country really was formed and became the wealthiest nation in the world because of its direct involvement in chattel slavery, I recommend reading two works: The Half Has Never Been Told by Edward Baptist and Empire of Cotton by Sven Beckert. Those two will get you started on a historical analysis of what has brought us to this moment today. Now, how does that relate to police brutality and people being killed? You cannot treat people like that if you view them as being human.
Yeah.
And so that situation has at its roots rendering someone either invisible or inhuman. And that's a part of the hard conversations that my group talked about that we have to have on an individual level before we move it to a corporate. So stop right there.
Yeah. And I would love to speak to the question as well. Dr. Hurst and I had this conversation when I thought of the question a couple of days ago after reading the article that around the common good. For me, for this work to be sustainable, which is what I think the word I keep holding on to, particularly now that I work at the ACLU, where I'm like I said, I've said to you all, I'm in Harlem in New York. I'm a Black man, lived in a highly policed and segregated city during a period of high tension in policing, with a pandemic that has institutional factors that lead to target people who look like me, look like my father, look like Dr. Hurst, look like Stella, more so than anyone else, right? And these things are in Muhammad as well, but these things do not happen on accident. And when I ask the question, and particularly focusing on, I think I use the language of our African American founders. I call out names, like Dr. Hurst named a couple great books, but I would name some names if you're more like me and just like Googling names. Look at Du Bois, W.B. Du Bois. Look at Ida B. Wells, and look at how other people talk about Harriet Tubman. because part of our understanding of where we need to head to is the study of those who had a sustainable practice of moving towards freedom, a sustainable practice of global citizenry, not a moment. Because I think if you listen to the conversations you're having with your people right now, how many of them are saying we're in a moment? And I think that's a critical thing that you have to challenge yourself to hold and say, and challenge, and if you feel confident, challenge them on. This is not a moment. This is 400 years and counting. To call it a moment is to say that every day is your first birthday. So if we are, to call it a moment is to continuously reset the finish line at, we're still at the beginning. To call it a moment is to not hold people accountable to the claim of intellect that they hold, to the claim of compassion that they hold, and to the claim of citizenry that they hold. You do not get to claim those three words: citizen, compassionate, and having an expertise, or being an expert, or being intelligent, if you are unable to be emotionally intelligent, if you're unable to hold compassion for those who are not in your immediate experience, and you're unable to look at words on a page or watch a video that explains your country's history. If you can't watch a 5 to 10 minute video on just even your favorite sports team, or your favorite holiday visit vacation spot, and this legacy of enslavement in this country, I mean, I don't know what it is it's going to take for folks, but I think the point of that last thing is to say, if you're not willing to disrupt the way in which you normally think about your life, to include not me personally, because I personally like you all, but if you never think about me again, I will be fine. Except for you, Dad, of course. That would be pretty tough. But, and Dr. Hurst. But my point is that, in some ways these folks are right about this being a moment, meaning we're not going to be able to hold this conversation forever. But I don't think Ida B. Wells, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, the list, there's thousands, by the way, and unnamed abolitionists, unnamed enslaved Americans, unnamed enslaved Africans, who were embodying the values we discussed today without the level of formalized education, without a Zoom to bridge universes, right? Like Yvonne said so brilliantly, without all that we have, those people committed themselves to the liberation of a people, and not just the liberation. I think that it gets caught up and thought of as they were committed themselves to the liberation of Black people, enslaved Black people. No, they were caught up in the liberation of this country. We are all racialized the moment we breathe air and walk on this land here. Maybe in other countries it's a little different. I can't speak to other countries. I know my time in Jordan, I was still seen as a Black man, okay? People still treated me different and asked me to throw their trash out at restaurants when I had a whole American passport in my pocket. So I will speak to a globalized idea of this liberation. We are liberating those who fail to see themselves as racialized. How can we be global citizens when a key tenet of this global citizenry, the acknowledgement of our foundation, is something we don't ask our colleagues to have too, our friends and our family to have? We are acknowledging that our foundation, my foundation as a Black man, comes from my family. Yvonne's foundation as a person, as a global citizen, comes from what she spoke to earlier. Stella, everyone who spoke to a foundation that was rooted in truth, in things that they can show photos of, and things that they can ask their cousin about, and things that they can ask their colleagues about that they do routinely, and things that they can hold and come back to. If we cannot ask the people who are not with us already to find artifacts to hold this truth, vessels to hold this truth, physical items if it need be to hold this truth, it will be a moment. The things that kept Du Bois and Wells and folks going was the continuum of conversation that they had with those who recognized the artifacts of their legacy. I was blessed. I've been blessed to go on an unofficial tour of all the kind of Black history museums that exist in this country over the last 2 years. And the thread that cuts across to me that always shocks me is when I see like, it's not the photos, it's not the data where they show how many people were brought over, and it's over 12 million, by the way, and how many people died. Well over 2 million people died just in transport. It's not the names on plaques that show enslaved people and free Black people being lynched in the 1940s and 50s in crowds of 4,000 showing up. In those artifacts that show that fact are sold in stores at the time. Postcards from Colorado saying, "Wish you were here," with 3 Black bodies hanging in crowds of 4,000 watching, not in white hoods, but just in everyday clothes, because it was a thing to be done, it was a thing to be seen, and it was just like all the things that are more than moments, it was a returning to the artifacts, to the gestures, and the expression of a culture. If we want folks to hold this more than a moment, we have to challenge them to change the artifacts, the expressions, and the continuum of their culture. That is why we tear down statues that have Klansmen on them. That is why we want to rename things. It's not because PC culture and everyone's too sensitive to look at a word. I've been called the N-word more in 2020 than I have in a long time, frankly. And it doesn't hurt me physically, but it evokes the gesture, the conversation, the symbol of my death is imminent. That is the point of calling someone the N-word. It is to invoke that reality, that I am superior as a white man. That is my legacy. That's why people use those gestures. So we have to use gestures as well. We have to ask them to hold new gestures, new artifacts, new statues, new holidays like Juneteenth tomorrow, hallelujah. And not new, by the way, it's not new, but the acknowledgement is new. We have to ask folks to do that. It may feel silly sometimes when you say, well, you know, the Nike just added a holiday, it's just a stunt. Sure. But I know that if it wasn't for there being an MLK Day on the calendar, I would never learn about my people in school. Everything matters. The small gestures matter. You make them matter. 4th of July is no different than Juneteenth, except for it's a way better story. But the fireworks sales, if you look at the data for 4th of July versus Juneteenth, I bet there's a very big difference, right? Because who's celebrating what and why? It's all gestures. And the only way we move from a moment is when we have people challenge their expertise, their ability to learn, challenge their compassion, their ability to listen and be humbled, and challenge their, sorry, I lost my last thought. Dang, I was on a roll, wasn't I? And challenge their
emotional intelligence.
There's one last piece there. There's a word. I think it's empathy. Is that the word I was saying? Sorry. Yeah, passion. I said it. And challenge their passion, meaning their ability to say, you know what, I'll read another page. You know what, I'll post another thing on Facebook. You know what, I will donate $10 every month to the NAACP instead of this one-time donation of $4 or $10 or $3. It has to show up in your repeated action, and that is the only way it stops being a moment. And when you all cite the things that you claim to define your global citizenry, I would put my life savings and my dad's life savings on the fact that you're citing things that are actions and behaviors you still do. When Dr. Hurst and I had this conversation a couple days ago, and I'll stop here. When we had this conversation a couple days ago, he cited something Mary said that I told him, I don't know exactly what I said to him a couple days ago, and I don't even know, of course I don't know what I said back when I was 15. But he said to me that Mary said, you said the exact same thing, you know, over 10, 12 years ago, 10 to 13 years ago. That's what it means to me to be a global citizen. That's what it means to fight for liberation, when it is a perpetual, not a focus, but it's a continuum that is rooted in the things I surround myself with in my apartment, the people I spend time with every day, the media I consume, the way I speak to people, the way I look them in the eye when I have words to say. It boils down to so much more of the simple things you learn as a child. than the complex things we try to make it about when we're trying to be smart. And so when I say it's about compassion, passion, and expertise, y'all know exactly what that looks like in your lives already. You know what you're passionate about and what it looks like, what that evoking feeling in your gut is when you're passionate. You know what compassion feels like when you look at someone and you go, I love them to death. You know what your expertise is when someone looks at, when you say, if somebody said, hey, let me see your resume, you would be able to pop that joint out right now. So you know what it looks like to pull out the exemplars of the things that make you an expert or make you talented. If you can hold those three prongs of this together, like Jack has done, Jack is brilliant, bro. Jack left Percival, Virginia, and went to Howard. Okay? Percival, he can speak to his experience, but I'll tell you about Percival. Ain't nobody going to Howard from Percival. I would guess that people thought I was Jack at the beginning of this call, all right? And look, Jack, let's kick it sometime. Because I would love to hear your take on Percival. I'd love to have that conversation with Dr. Hurst and us really digest and really have a real conversation about that shared space. But my point is, Jack brought his expertise, his critical thinking acumen to this work. He brought his passion to this work by taking on pro bono projects, even when he's doing a full-time lawyer job right out of law school from Harvard. So you know he could have just he had the pick of the litter. And then he also brought compassion today while he has work going on in his life to show up for us to have this conversation. I mean, that's what I mean about showing up and how this becomes a continuum of action, a continuum of belief, a continuum of perpetual commitment. And that's all.
That's too kind, Robert. I appreciate that. It's too kind, but thank you. It's a pleasure to hear your words.
So I just want to say that, I'm sorry, did I cut you off, Jack?
No, not at all, not at all.
I just want to say that this topic, Eric bringing this out in our Facebook exchange a couple weeks ago is a really important topic. And I think that Robert, everything that you bring to the conversation and Jack and Eric brought to the conversation just makes me reflect on what is my essence, like what is my essence and how much do I bring that into my life and into my actions and into my words and all that. I do challenge everybody to kind of write your personal mission statement like Robert did on his LinkedIn, because it gives you that moment to test yourself a bit. I'm going to actually send it over to Mr. Rash. Do you want to wrap this up? I'm sure you've had some thoughts. Then we're going to take a picture of everybody, and we're going to put some things in the chat, and this is all available tomorrow on our website. So go ahead, Mr. Rash. You're muted. Go ahead and unmute.
It's very hard. It's very, very hard to follow these gentlemen and their insights. Of course, I remember my many identities and how true it is what you say about how you come to these understandings from your own national, racial, religious background, the own icons that you have in your own life. So, as I said earlier, I was blessed to be able to be near Dr. King in the early 1960s in marches, and there are two quotations of his that seem to encompass a lot for me. So I'll just speak for me, but I'll give you his quotations because they talk about the essence, which I think is love, and the action that's necessary. In his Nobel acceptance, in his Nobel Award acceptance, he said, "I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and the war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word." I heard him deliver that, on the news, because I wasn't in Sweden at the time, but I remember the day he delivered it. And again, later he said, I believe it was, I can't remember exactly where this quotation came from, but I believe it was at the end of one of the marches that we were on. He said, "Human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice and suffering and struggle. tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals. So today we have seen all of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Morgan, I think you're going to take a photo, right?
Yes.
And good. So cool. So if you're comfortable with your video on, keep it on. We're going to put this out tomorrow with the link to the recording and everything. So give us a countdown.
All right. Everybody smile wide. 3, 2, 1. Let me see. And that's looking good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to stay, I know probably people have to get back to their office, feel free. One thing I did want to point out is the Global Youth Village, which has been talked about a lot today, is this amazing summer program. Because of COVID, we can't do it this year. So of course that has financial ramifications. So if anybody wants to guarantee the future of Global Youth Village, you can go to our website and donate. That would be really, really helpful. We did create a virtual exchange, and we're doing our best to keep the tradition going so that we continue to serve humanity. In that way, we have about 89 young people from 20 different countries starting next week, our virtual exchange. So I again want to thank, you can unshare, Jason. I want to thank everybody for coming, particularly Eric and Robert and Jack and Bob. Thank you for sharing your son with humanity. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Really appreciate everything. Thank you very much. Great gathering. And
thank you, everyone.
Robert, Dynamo.
I appreciate everyone. Mary, would it be